Hello and welcome to History Time. Mayday is approaching, and on this occasion, we need to remember that there is a Mayday Park in this city. If so, what is the connection between Mayday and Chennai? And there are certain amazing connections. And why is that particular park known as Mayday Park? These are the questions that we are going to explore and find answers for in today's episode. Join me in finding out about Mayday and Mayday Park. Mayday is observed in most parts of Europe and several parts of Asia. It commemorates a resolution in a workers' congress in 1889 in Paris to observe the 1st of May as a day to commemorate the rights of workers. It takes significance from a strike organized in the United States of America on the 1st of May in 1886. Ironically, May Day is not observed in the USA any longer. They observe what is known as Labor Day, which is the first Monday in the month of September. But the rest of the world celebrates May Day. But May Day is what we are used to, and today let's look at the history of May Day in this city. Did you know, for instance, that the first labor union of India was established in this city? That was in 1918. It was known as the Madras Labor Union. Sadly, that landmark institution's offices are still standing, but in a completely derelict condition in Strahan's Road in Puliyanthopu. Why should the labor union's office be in Strahan's Road? And that has a long and interesting history behind it. In 1856, the Madras Railway Company was established with its headquarters in Rayapuram. Once the engines and the compartments began rolling, you needed a workshop. And therefore, in 1857, a railway workshop was established in Perambur, and a large number of workers were employed in it. The workshop still incidentally continues to exist and was the seed for the establishment of the Integral Coach Factory, which is today a much larger institution. Close to the Madras Railway workshops came the Buckingham and the Carnatic mills. They were established in the 1860s and they began to employ a huge labor force. Then towards the end of the 19th century, you had further industrial establishments coming up in this area, such as the Massey and Company, which was into making heavy engineering products. And then you had, with the establishment of the harbour workers and also the large oil installations that are still such a feature of Rayapuram and which once stood in front of Fort St. George. All these places employed workers in huge numbers. And it was but natural that when the labour movement began in this city, it would be in this part of Madras. The labour movement in the city itself, there were strikes prior to what happened in 1918, but they were all sporadic issues. It was only in 1918 that for the first time a proper union was established in this city. And that was thanks to two people, Selvapati Chettiar and Venkat Ramanjulu Naidu. They were both running a sabha called the Venkatesha Gunamritabhivarshini Sabha in the Puliyanthopu area. And that is where the Perambur and the Buckingham and Carnatic mill workers would come in order to spend their brief periods of rest and to relax. In fact, it was a place where bhajans would be rendered. On one such occasion in 1918, the two of them got to know that the workers were complaining about their treatment at the Buckingham and Carnatic mills. And that was when the idea first came that a union could be formed. Several other notable labour leaders had a role to play in it, including Thiruvi Kalyanasundara Mudaliyar and M. Singaravelu. They all decided that they would approach Annie Besant at the Theosophical Society. This fiery and doughty lady was at that time leading one of the many streams that would eventually become the freedom movement of this country. And Annie Besant and her close associate G.S. Arundel were the people who decided that B.P. Wadia, who was one of the followers of Annie Besant, should work towards creating a union. And that is how in 1918 the Madras Labour Union came to be established, and it organized strikes at the Buckingham and Carnatic mills in order to establish fair working hours and give rights to workers. Do you know that at that time, if workers went on a strike, the management could actually take the striking workers to court and sue them for damages for non-productivity? There was in fact no established rights for the unions. It was post this that all of that came about. In 1918, with the establishment of the Madras Labour Union, action became very rapid. Thereafter, the railway workers established themselves into a union, the tram workers established themselves into union, kerosene oil vendors and kerosene oil company employees became a union, even the bakers of Madras, the servants in European houses, they all formed themselves into unions. The labour movement spread very, very rapidly. One of the leaders of the labour movement in this city was M. Singaravelu. Malayapuram Singaravelu Chettiar, to give his proper name. He was the son of Venkatachala Chettiar, who was a fairly well-to-do personality in the fishermen community. The family lived as a joint one in a large private property on what is today known as Kamaraj Salai, but during colonial times was known as South Beach Road. It was here, very close to the ice house, that Singaravelu and his family had their large residence, number 22 South Beach Road. It is believed that the Lady Willingdon Institute and similar educational institutions today exist on land that once belonged to that particular family. Singaravelu was born in 1860. He had his school education at the Hindu High School, Triplicane. Thereafter, he passed his FA at the Madras Christian College, then had his bachelor's degree at the Presidency College. Rather late in life, for he was 47, he enrolled himself as a Vakil in the High Court of Madras. He had by then graduated from the Law College. What he did after he graduated from Presidency until the time that he had joined the Law College remains a bit of a mystery. It is believed that he went to England in order to conduct certain business deals on behalf of his family, and that is where he came to see and to hear about the new modern thoughts that were going around about the rights of the depressed classes and also about the rights of the workers. Having come back to Madras in 1907, he became, as I said, a lawyer and very soon established himself as a successful one. He had a fairly large practice. At the same time, he was greatly influenced by the thinking of leaders like Ayotidas Panditar, and given the fact that he had also been to England and come back, he began to toy with the idea of Buddhism as a suitable religious solace for members of the backward classes and the depressed classes. His house, in fact, became the headquarters of the Mahabodhi Society. So in many ways, he was a forerunner of what Dr. B.R. Ambedkar would become. In 1918, when the Madras Labour Union was formed, he, along with Thiruvi Kalyanasundaranar, became an active member of the Labour Union and in the court began to represent workers in several cases that came about. Interestingly, this was also the time when Mahatma Gandhi began to visit Madras repeatedly. Having met Gandhi, Singaravelu became a member of the Congress Party as well. And in 1921, responding to a call from Mahatma Gandhi, he publicly discarded his lawyer's gown and set it on fire at a public meeting in the Marina Beach. And thereafter, he gave up his lawyer's practice and devoted himself entirely to the uplift of society. On 1st May 1923, Singaravelu formed what was known as the Kisan Labour Party. And the launch of that party with the celebration of Mayday was conducted by him at the High Court Beach. What is the High Court Beach? High Court Beach today does not exist. It was a large expanse of beach, and that was the original beach of Madras, which is today entirely occupied by the harbour. And it was there that he observed his May Day celebrations. At the same time, a second May Day celebration was also held and that was held in Tiruvallikeni under the guidance of other leaders. When did Mayday Park come into the observance of Mayday celebrations? Shortly after the first Mayday celebration in the whole of India, which was in 1923 in our city. As I said earlier, Singaravelu had conducted that in the High Court Beach. On 27th of August the same year, that is 1923, Singaravelu organized a large public meeting of workers at the Napier Park, which was very close to Mount Road. Now we need to go into the history of Napier Park. Until 1849, the property that today comprises the Madras Mail, Pure and Sons, the Hindu, Simpson and Company, and a large chunk of what is Mayday Park all belonged to one company called the Berghalls Stables. They were into saddlery and livery making for horses. By the 1880s, the entire property was cut up and sold. But even earlier, in 1869, the northernmost part of Berghalls Stables was handed over to the city corporation with a request that it be converted into a public park. And that is when 14.5 acres were taken over and work began on creating a park there. In 1879, the park was ready and it was named after Lord Napier, who was the governor of Madras during the 1860s. And that is how Napier's Park gets its name. Now, what did that park have to do with workers' rights? Well, that is a very interesting question. But remember that by the 1880s, Mount Road was becoming a place where large establishments existed. There was Spencer and Company, Simpson and Company, Addison and Company, and several others who had their offices, not just their offices, they had their workshops just behind their buildings. So post 1918, most of the workers in these places had formed unions for themselves. In fact, Addison's at that time, today it may be an engineering company, but in those days it was a company that was running a printing press, and the workers there led the formation of a printing press workers union. And that is why it made perfect sense to have a meeting in Napier's Park. So the first labour meeting of Madras was held on 27th August 1923 at Napier's Park. And that is how it acquires its significance in the story of workers' struggles. Following the establishment of the Communist Party of India in 1925, Singaravelu dissolved his Kisan Labour Party and made it a part of the Communist Party. In fact, he is considered to be the first communist of South India. From then on, Singaravelu identified himself completely with the communists, and he was even invited to preside over the first meeting of the Communist Party of India, which took place in Kanpur. He did so, but he was immediately faced with a criminal conspiracy case slapped on him by the government of India. By the time, Singaravelu was a thorn in British flesh. When the Jallianwala Bagh massacre had happened in 1919, he had organized a massive peaceful protest march in the city of Madras. More importantly, in 1921, when the Prince of Wales, later to be Edward VIII, arrived on a state visit, he organized for a very successful boycott of the Prince. All shops and establishments in the city, except those that were run by the British, were closed. And so they decided in 1925 that the conspiracy case was a perfect excuse to throw him into prison. Sadly for them, also sadly for Singaravelu, he was exceedingly ill at this time. You must remember he was born in 1860 and therefore in 1925 he was 65 years old already, and he could not even attend the trial, and therefore the magistrate decided to excuse him, and that judgment passed him by without affecting him in any way. But the British were continuously keeping an eye on him, and their next excuse came when the great Indian railway strikes happened between 1927 and 1928. You must remember that at that point of time, there was no Indian railway. The railways in India were run by several private companies. So you had the Greater Indian Peninsular Railway, the Oudh and Rohilkhand Railway, Bombay, Baroda and Central Indian Railway, the Bengal Nagpur Railway, the Madras and South Maratha Railway Company, the South Indian Railway Company, and so on and so forth. There were several railway companies, all of them operating over various parts of India. By 1927, you must remember that the First World War was long over, and during that period, several extra workers had been employed by the railways to carry on with a lot of work. By the 1920s, all that work had ceased, and all the railway companies in India decided that they were going to terminate the employment of several of their workers. This resulted in a series of strikes. In South India, particularly in what is today Tamil Nadu, Singaravelu organized a strike of the South Indian Railway Company, which was headquartered in Tiruchirappalli. For 10 days, the railways came to a complete halt, and the workers of the South Indian Railway Company also indulged in a lot of sabotage of railway equipment. When at the end of the 10th day, the railway took back control over the running of its rolling stock, criminal cases were foisted on Singaravelu and others, and though a battery of some of the best lawyers of South India, including Nugent Grant and Satyamurthy, represented him, he was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. But in 1930, he was released, and thereafter he became a staunch supporter of the Communist Party of India. It is very interesting to see that Singaravelu and Periyar E.V. Ramaswamy were very close friends, and Singaravelu wrote a number of articles in Kudiyarasu, which was the magazine that Periyar was running. But the two of them differed on one crucial issue. Periyar believed that when independence came, the higher castes, particularly the Brahmins, would dominate administration, and therefore it would be far better for the British administration to continue. On the other hand, Singaravelu felt that whatever happens, it is better for Indians to administer themselves. And if at all there was a problem of upper caste domination, it had to be fought from within. And therefore he continued to align himself with the Congress party. Despite this, the two of them cooperated and collaborated on several occasions and shared the stage together as well. That was clearly an era when politics was based on principle and not on private enmity. Singaravelu continued to remain a leader of the Communist Party. He was a great mentor to Jivanandam, who would become the great communist leader from this part of the country, and he encouraged him to start what was known as the Congress Socialist Party. He also helped him in bringing out a magazine for workers and continued his life this way till the early 1940s, when a series of strokes began to destroy his good health. And in 1946, he passed away, greatly mourned by all. Singaravelu was a great lover of books, and he had, it is believed, an extensive library. A man of few words, what needed to goad him into action was somebody being deprived of their rights somewhere, and he would be there to fight for it. This was the man then who brought Mayday celebrations to Madras and brought it to a park which thereafter became the center for all Mayday celebrations. And given the fact that several of the large companies existed around it, this became the location for their meetings, which is why in 1996 that park was renamed as Mayday Park. It still continues to flourish, though a significant part of it has now been taken over, temporarily they say, by the metro rail for their rolling stock and for their civil works that is still ongoing. Have you ever visited Mayday Park? You should go and see it. And while there, think about the contribution of great men such as Singaravelu, who have made it possible for us to live in a free India and in a flourishing Madras, that is Chennai. If you like this episode, like it, share it with your friends and subscribe to this channel. And I promise to be back with you with many more interesting and inspiring episodes from the history of our beloved city. Bye for now.